and welcome to the 12th episode of Forgotten History. I'm Gunnar and Leo.
And this is Leonardo Powers. Today on Forgotten History, we will look into Black October, officially called the 1993 Constitutional Crisis, which was a violent and significant political standoff between President Boris Yeltsin and the Parliament of the Supreme Soviet from September 21st to October 4th, 1993.
We will cover the build-up and reasons for this of the event itself, and finally, we will discuss its major political impacts and importance in general to the globe and Russia.
With that, let's get right into this.
So have you ever even heard of Black October 1993 or have any knowledge on the situation of Russia in 1993 or a little bit before?
I would say so. I would say I know some context, given that the Soviet Union collapsed during 1991 after Mikhail Gorbachev resigned his presidency.
Well, according to history.state.gov, before the fall of the USSR, however, leaving the Communist Party in 1990, Boris Yeltsin gained popularity as a pro-democracy, anti-corruption reformer and key figure.
Later, Boris Yeltsin, in June of 1991, was elected the first president of the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic in a popular direct election, giving him a strong democratic mandate.
According to Britannica.com, also occurring in 1991 was that of the August coup, where people in support of conservative communism in a 3-day period tried to replace Mikhail Gorbachev, who was leading the country away from its traditional communism and ways of life.
The coup was resolved to an extent when Boris Yeltsin went on a tank outside the Russian parliament, defying the coup, which ended soon.
The coup, which ultimately failed, finalized the destruction of the Communist Party's power, and led to Mikhail Gorbachev virtually holding no authority. After all, Boris Yeltsin gained large authority in Moscow from the people.
According to ADSD.org, much later in the year, in December 1991, Boris Yeltsin, with leaders from Ukraine and Belarus, signed the Belavezha Accords, declaring the USSR dissolved and replacing it with a Commonwealth of Independent States. Now, the Soviet Union was practically dissolved at this point, so what are your thoughts on how does this change the globe?
Well, the USSR, following World War II, right? 1945, the Cold War breaks out, right? They had a lot of power, okay? So did the U.S., so they were kind of fighting it off, right? And it started to die down really with Mikhail Gorbachev, and they say he sold the Soviet Union, right? In a way, he might have, right? He kind of changed it, and it fell because he had a lot of reforms that didn't really work. But whatever, I'm just trying to say here, the major power dynamic in the world, the U.S. and the USSR challenging each other, is completely gone. And now, in a way, the U.S. is the only main top dog. And that can kind of be seen in a way till today, but there's major people coming up like China. Russia's kind of completely fallen behind in ways.
Yes,
although Russia's still quite powerful, they're nothing like their former shell in the Soviet
their sphere of influence just declined ever since the Union really dissolved because, the Russian influence was basically limited to just any communist states, frankly speaking, but ever since...
Well, it's really since the 80s. I don't think in the 90s, even early.
No, even in the 90s, it was just kind of...
It was over.
Yeah.
Okay, well, according to blogs, lse.ac.uk, immediately following the collapse of the USSR, the Russian Federation formed. And as stated, Boris Yeltsin was in power. But with this change came a lot of problems, such as Russia having a strange and complicated political structure using the old 1978 Soviet Constitution, which made the Congress of People's Deputies the highest power, not the president.
In the initial presidency of Yeltsin, he pursued quick market reforms, price liberalization, and privatization to diminish the old planned economy.
The reforms led to massive inflation, wiped out savings, and caused intense public poverty.
One of Boris Yeltsin's biggest issues, which is very pivotal, is the parliament led by Ruslan Khasbulatov and Vice President Alexander Rutskoy, who were once former allies who turned against Boris Yeltsin, seeing his reforms as dangerous Western-sponsored shock therapy that was impoverishing and ruining the nation. They blocked his economic reforms, leading to a total stalemate in government.
According to nsarchive.gwu.edu, this all culminated when on September 21st, 1993, President Boris Yeltsin issued a decree dissolving and dismantling the parliament, which was unconstitutional. Yeltsin heavily claimed his power came directly from the people, but this created much division among groups of people in the new Russian Federation. Yes.
This is very important as it is the direct reason for the soon violent events of Black October in 1993.
According to AFSA.org, following Yeltsin's decision, the Constitutional Court on September 22, 1993, declared Yeltsin's action illegal and not permitted. the opposing parliament voted to impeach and remove Boris Yeltsin, naming an individual, Rutskoy, as an acting president.
After this, lawmakers and parliament members barricaded themselves inside the White House, aka the Parliament building in Moscow, while thousands of pro-parliament protesters surrounded outside, which soon erupted into grand violence and brutality.
For example, on October 3rd, many protesters broke out and fought through police barricades armed with weapons distributed from volunteers. They occupied the mayor's office, notably, killing some police, and they also attacked Ostankino Station, which was a television center.
According to www.eastview.com, on October 4th, 1993, Boris Yeltsin secured the army's loyalty. Yeltsin ordered tanks to brutally shell the White House. The building caught a large fire, and by the end of the day, important parliamentary leaders Rutskoy and Khasbulatov and resistance forces surrendered and were arrested.
The violent outbreak, which included intense street battles, had a large toll with some 147 deaths and many more injuries. Some sources estimate these numbers to be significantly larger, which is most likely like hidden, you know what I mean? Because this was a major kind of crazy event to occur. So they probably didn't mention all the people, you know?
Mm-hmm. Well,
So what are your thoughts on the response of President Boris Yeltsin? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it reasonable? And how do you think the Russian population felt about this?
I don't think any form of violence in a way that can be. I don't think like any methods of violence that can be solved through like actual just normal diplomacy is really necessary.
Because he utilized tanks to get a political point across. Which is kind of crazy.
I wonder what other countries were doing this at the time. 1989, anyway.
Yeah. Well, you have a point, right? I'm just like, especially it's not even the Soviet Union anymore, right? It's new democratic.
It's just Russia.
Like, it's like even in the late Soviet Union, like they claimed they weren't as authoritarian as they were in the past, but like this is a apparent democratic Russia.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a president who's coming
supposedly
out here.
Democratic.
Yeah. Coming out here, sending the military to kill people and dismantling the parliament, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Not even trying to reach a deal. I think he was maybe angry that he's getting impeached, which he doesn't want to lose his title, obviously, and whatever. But in general...
I mean, it sounds like he was just trying to seize a dictatorship. That's really...
Yeah, but
the key point.
How do you think the population felt, right? Because before they're having these economic reforms that were ruining the economy in a way.
Yeah.
So how do you think they felt?
Well, I'd say, given the fact that they're already, not in a really good spot economically speaking, knowing that the fact that their current leader, or I guess current and former leaders, are like just fighting each other over political power rather than trying to actually like fix the country is a pretty disappointing thing, I imagine.
Yeah, I'm sure the population was very disappointed. So,
well, no matter what people thought about Yeltsin or the events following Black October, the old Russian parliament was practically removed, and in December 1993, a brand new constitution was permitted, granting the president enormous unchecked powers and further weakening the legislature.
Also, for example, in the 1993 elections, a surprising 23% of the vote was for Vladimir Zhirinovsky, who was a neoliberal fascist. This showcases the dislike for decisions and the power of Boris Yeltsin in this after the events of Black October.
According to Carnegie Endowment, globally, this was also important to the U.S. and President Bill Clinton and its Western allies, as they strongly supported and advocated for Yeltsin, viewing him as a democratic reformer battling conservative communists. Although the sight of a leader firing tanks at his own parliament made this support controversial, some Western leaders saw it as a necessary means to keep reforms on track.
Further, the loss of the old parliament meant that the shock therapy economic reforms continued without significant political opposition, resulting in significant, often corrupt, transfer of state assets to a small group of powerful individuals.
Finally, the crisis completed the destruction of the Soviet-era power structure, which fully established a capitalist-directed government, but Russian support would further become untrustworthy, especially when they engaged in later struggles and conflicts. So, what are your key takeaways from Black October and its legacy? I mean, how do you think it influences Russian politics today?
Well, yeah, and power dynamics and stuff. So I would just say in general, think about at the time, right? We're going to have all this money in a way, being allowed to be with the certain individuals, creating a massive economic disparity.
Mm-hmm.
Not just economic, but also political disparity, such as with the power of the president. So Boris Yeltsin is going to hold the significant power, and he's later going to be able to go and do stuff like in the Chechen wars and things, which was an internal conflict. But it's just notable examples. Like, and then we're going to look in the future, right? When Putin gets elected, I think it's 1999.
Yeah.
He comes in power, and he's been for quite some time, right? Putin's going to utilize this now, not changed, right? This power that the executive branch has to do what he wants, right? And he can keep himself in power because there in Russia now, the democratic system they had right after the fall of the Soviet Union is just gone.
And now it's just like the really powerful executive branch.
Yeah. So Putin can go and do whatever he wants in Russia, and not really anyone can stop him. So that's just an example in the future. And at that time period, Boris Yeltsin was able to do similar things.
Mm-hmm.
I would highly recommend building further historical knowledge and understanding of the 1993 constitutional crisis and its impacts, as they are truly important to Russian decisions in history and major global history in general, right? We can see with the Ukraine war, whether I think that was an executive decision, obviously. That's just a notable example.
Yeah.
So that's just, for example, something that this could have led to in other conflicts, right? There's many other conflicts in the future and things we didn't discuss that Russia was engaged in with this new system.
And with that, unfortunately, we have made it to the end of our podcast. Me and Gunnar hope you learned a lot about Black October 1993, the Russian constitutional crisis, and its fascinating historical significance and impactful legacy. Thank you for listening to our 12th episode of Forgotten History.
This has been Gunnar Engler
and Leonardo Powers
for the 12th episode
of Forgotten History.